Welcome to the Bald Brad Show. Our lead story of the day is regarding yesterday's White House press briefing where reporters questioned Karine Jean-Pierre on the negotiation talks that are happening between McCarthy and Biden on raising the debt ceiling, and reporters are pushing back here, folks. Before we jump into any of that, support a true American patriot by hitting that like and subscribe button. Leave us a short, sweet comment down below, and make sure you check out our Join tab, folks. Become a patriot by joining in the link below. With that being said, we have Peter Alexander of NBC News getting a litany of questions in to Karine Jean-Pierre regarding the debt ceiling limit. Let's go ahead and roll it.
Just to be clear on timing, is any date before June 1st, in your eyes, good enough to get this thing done?
Look, we have to get this done. That's what I can tell you.
Is like Friday the goal, Saturday the goal?
You're asking me for a date. I'm not gonna get into dates. What I can say, there's an urgency. We want to see this done as soon as possible. As it relates to the debt limit, the teams are going to meet on a regular basis, multiple times a day, to deal with the budget negotiations. And this could be, this could be done today. Actually, I guess the
reason I ask is because there've been ramifications before. We've witnessed this back
Absolutely.
in 2011. It went down to the wire. They still beat the ex-state. They still got the debt limit raised at the last minute. But then days later, the credit rating was downgraded. How confident are you that, given the dysfunction we've witnessed here, it going down to the wire, our credit rating would not be downgraded?
Look, this is why the president has, Peter, this is why the president for the last 5 months has stated how important and how critical it is to get this done, how critical it is for Congress to do their constitutional duty. This is why you have heard an echo from here over and over and over.
If the president thought it was so critical, he would have been meeting with McCarthy about this way sooner. He just started meeting with the guy like last week. And even then, right, he goes to Hiroshima, he goes to Japan, and then, he comes back a day early. But then when Peter Doocy questions Karine Jean-Pierre in Japan about, hey, is the president able to meet with McCarthy while he's there, or at least send Kamala Harris, who's in Los Angeles, to maybe the Capitol to deal with this whole negotiation thing? She goes, well, how's the president going to do that? How possibly could he do that, Peter? And Peter's like, well, he spent his whole first half of his term like making Zoom calls and just doing everything over the internet because of COVID-19 and what's taking place there. He very easily could call in. So he's not taking this seriously whatsoever, folks. He's not taking it serious on one iota. We're about 9 days from this thing collapsing here, and nothing's being done. McCarthy just came out today and was like, we're not any closer than we were yesterday to solving this whole thing.
A repetitive one of how we think and believe this should have moved forward.
It didn't happen. So how confident are you that it wouldn't be downgraded?
Look, from what we see and what has been happening in these budget negotiations, in these conversations, we see these conversations moving in a productive way. That is important, and we'll get there.
Hold on to that, you guys, about moving in a productive way, because in our third segment today, 100% contradicts the negotiation talks that are taking place because Joe Biden's not budging. She says it herself. Just wait till we get to it. Hold on to that. She says the word productive in this entire hour-long freaking press briefing. Everything's productive. She got called out for it. We're not going to cover it, but I'm just making you aware that all the reporters, that was a very typical answer from her. Oh, everything's productive. We're moving forward in this, even though McCarthy came out and said they aren't.
It has to be a bipartisan, right? It has to be a bipartisan, reasonable budget negotiation.
Let me ask you, yesterday we heard from Speaker McCarthy multiple times, spoke multiple times in the morning, spoke multiple times after the meeting took place. We heard from the president very briefly during the meeting. For Americans that feel like they're not hearing from the president regularly, not hearing from the vice president regularly, not hearing from cabinet officials right now, where is the messaging from the White House on this beyond at this podium?
Well, you've heard from the president multiple times over the weekend. You've heard from the president multiple times during the last 5 months. He has been very clear. You've heard from me. You've heard from others. We've had our economic team out there talking about this on your network, on other networks. And so we've been very clear for the past 5 months. I wouldn't just look at the last couple of days. The past 5 months, consistently. You've heard from this president.
Feel like it's winning the messaging war on this?
I mean, look, what we have been very clear. I know folks have asked me, about this in the past, and what we saw in 2011 is that, and polling showed this, that the GOP was blamed for that. That's how the Americans saw the outcome of the debt limit there and what was happening with the negotiations back then. That's what the polling showed. So what we're going to do is we're going to continue to either speak from here almost every day. We speak from here about what's going on. You've heard from the president. You've heard from the economic team. You've heard from Democrats. The leadership in the House, in the Senate speak to this about the urgency, about Congress actually needing to act and doing their constitutional duty.
Last one is you said that if both sides are working in good faith, this will get done. Does the president believe that Kevin McCarthy is working in good faith?
What the president believes is that the conversations have been productive, and that is important. And just to reiterate this, negotiations are hard. They're not easy. This is democracy in action as we have seen it, as we have looked at what's been going on these past couple of days and weeks. And what both sides need to understand is neither side is going to get exactly what they want. But what we need to have is a bipartisan, reasonable budget agreement, and that's what we're working
To be clear,
towards.
you didn't say the president thinks Kevin McCarthy is acting in good faith.
What I said is that if everyone keeps working in good faith. So, yes, we believe that that is what is happening. There is a good faith effort here. We just have to continue to do that. We have to keep doing that, and then we can get into a bipartisan, reasonable budget agreement.
Thank you, Karine.
Okay, so hold on to the idea of her saying productive and in good faith, because we're about to pull up Jackie Heinrich of Fox News in one moment, which kind of contradicts her statements in terms of acting in good faith, because she's calling McCarthy and the MAGA wing of the Republicans extremists, and the head of the Democrat Party, or at least one of them, is calling them that. So we'll get to that in just one moment. But I do want to highlight the aspect of talking about 2011 under Barack Obama's presidency, saying, the GOP were to blame. She is correct on that. That is where the blame went. But you could also say that Obama's popularity, I believe around that time, was also greater than what we're seeing from Joe Biden. Joe Biden is collapsing this country from the inside out. You look at inflation, you look at the American Rescue Plan, you look at what he's doing at the border, you look at our foreign policy, our domestic policy, Russia invaded Ukraine, China wanted to invade Taiwan, Iran nuclear deal, Iran's supposedly building nuclear weapons right now, you have Iran wanting to wipe Israel off the face of the planet. I know that's not a change from anything, but they're a lot closer to doing that than they were even before. So there's a lot of things that are happening here where I believe Joe Biden's getting most of the blame right now for what's taking place. And I'll tell you why. Because he's spending money up the wazoo. That's the whole reason why we had 40-year inflation. That's why people are paying more at the pump. People are still feeling the effects of what Joe Biden has done and his leadership here in this country. So they're going to side more with the GOP going, hey, can we just figure out a budget to where I'm not having to feel this at the gas pump, at the grocery store, taking out a mortgage, financing a vehicle? Can I not feel the effects of that? Can we just figure this out finally because we're $32 trillion in debt? It sounds a lot more reasonable coming from the GOP side of the aisle than the Democrat side of the aisle in current times, especially with, again, Joe Biden's leadership. So I think it's a miscalculation here from the Democrat Party. I think the Democrats are the ones that are going to be looked at here, not in favor, where the GOP is. So going into our next segment of the day, we got Wonder Woman, folks. I mean, we got Jackie Heinrich of Fox News, the one we love here on the Bald Brad channel, questioning her again on the debt ceiling, very similar to Peter Alexander in our first segment. If you haven't already checked that out, go over and check out Peter Alexander of NBC News, questioning her on this debt ceiling limit. Jackie does a phenomenal job here. Let's go ahead and roll it.
Thank you. The tone in the last few days has been very respectful between the White House and McCarthy's team. You just said a few moments ago that McCarthy's team is working in good faith. But this morning you had House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries slamming MAGA Republicans for dangerous default gamesmanship. You had Pete Aguilar saying McCarthy's beholden to the most extreme members of his party. So is House Democratic leadership undermining the work of the administration right now?
Not at all. We are aligned with them, with the leadership on both the House and the Senate, and that continues. And we have been aligned with them for the past several months.
Does Jeffries speak for the party here?
I believe he's the leader of the Democratic caucus on the House, so I would presume that is a yes.
So it just seems like
What? You guys see the confusion here? And Jackie's confused. I mean, look at Jackie's face. Jackie's trying to figure out, wait, what? Hold on a second. We just sat through this whole briefing right now for 34 minutes to hear you say one thing, and now you're contradicting another thing. You just got done saying that, yeah, things are productive and that McCarthy's acting in good faith, but then you have one of the leaders of the Democrat Party basically saying that he's not acting in good faith, and he's basically calling him out and calling him an extremist, very similar to what we've seen with Joe Biden, calling MAGA Republicans a threat to democracy and all these other things. So look at her face. I mean, her face says it all right here. So does the other reporter to the left of her. I think it's from CBS. So insane. Let's see if Jackie can untangle this insane web of logic in air quotes for those listening on audio, coming from the White House.
there's a bit of a divide between the rhetoric that he's using and the rhetoric we're hearing out of the White House.
Look, I think multiple things could happen at the same time. Clearly, Leader Jeffries is a partner in this, has been a partner as well as Leader Schumer. That will continue, and I'll just leave it there. I'm going to go to the back.
The discharge provision, one more. Is that at all a signal that House Democrats doubt the president's ability to lead the country to a solution here?
Well, that's an extreme analysis or
extreme.
Final kind of analysis there. I would say, if you look at what the president has done the last 2 years and the leadership that he has shown in passing historic pieces of legislation, bringing the Democrats together in passing in the Inflation Reduction Act, when he brought the Democrats together to pass his first legislation, which is the American Rescue Plan, that helped.
What? She's going to talk about this man's leadership? Do you see the flip-flop there that she did? It's actually very wise of her. She's clearly not as dumb as we all think that she is. She flip-flopped that. She first started with the Inflation Reduction Act, but why did they need the Inflation Reduction Act in the first place? Because of the American Rescue Plan that she's touting right here that literally led us into 40-year high inflation, just handing out stimulus checks like they're hotcakes. I'm not saying there shouldn't have been stimulus checks. The government literally shut everything down. The government's responsible for that, but not everybody needed a stimulus check. I was working in the classroom during COVID. I didn't need a stimulus check. I mean, the people I knew around me were also working. They didn't need stimulus checks. So if you just did it a wise way, we wouldn't have felt the effects in the same amount that we basically did because Joe Biden's just handing everybody out. I mean, the amount of fraud that took place too, that's a whole nother conversation. But if you notice, it should have been American Rescue Plan, then an Inflation Reduction Act. And here's a really big irony of it all. The Inflation Reduction Act actually doesn't reduce inflation. So it's just more money out the window. It's just more like infrastructure and all that other stuff, right? Inflation Reduction Act, sure. So, but she flip-flops it, right? She makes it seem like one doesn't actually correlate with the other, which they both 100% correlate and assimilate with one another, because the more money you spend, the higher the inflation is going to be. And now you're trying to reduce that inflation, which inflation is being reduced. But now our economy is slowing down because of a result of that reduced inflation, having increased interest rates and things like that. So sure, his leadership's going great. That's silly. Things are not going great at the moment right now. We're about to default on our debt, our $32 trillion debt.
Get the economy back on its feet. That is a president that has led. That is a president that has continued to lead. You look at the economy has been able to create 12.7 million jobs. It's been able to see an unemployment rate.
They're still pushing this. You guys. It's insane. Folks, you don't have to be a Republican, conservative, Democrat, independent, or anything. Just, folks, they keep posting this thing where it shows job creation on their Facebook and website and stuff like that, that shows the most jobs ever created, and Joe Biden's like skyrocketing on their bar graph or whatever it is, histogram bar graph. I can't remember which one they showed, but it shows Donald Trump like in the negative. Folks, they're getting shellacked in the comments on their own posts because nobody believes that. You shut down the entire globe. You shut down the American economy. People weren't allowed to open up their restaurants and businesses. So of course you're gonna create new jobs in air quotes if that's actually what you're doing. When in actuality, what you're really doing is just allowing people to go back. You didn't create anything. You just allowed people to go back. And some people just quit their jobs or never returned to their jobs, and they would start up a business, or they had a change in career path and all these things. So it's a manipulation of data. You didn't create all these jobs. It's silly. Nobody actually believes it, but that's the gaslighting that continually happens here from this White House, from this administration.
At one of the lowest that we have seen in modern time, and that's going to continue if we continue to do the work of the American people, get this budget negotiation done, and here, that's at stake. The work that this president has done, that is what's at stake right now.
This position that would be like an end run around what the president is doing.
Absolutely not. Look, I would refer you to Congress on their processes and what they're trying to do in Congress, but to say or suggest the president's leadership is in question, I think is completely false. I disagree with that premise, and certainly with that question, because if you look at the last 2 years, if you look at what Democrats have been able to get done with the leadership of this president, that is the complete opposite of what you just laid out. Go ahead, April.
Wow. Does anybody really believe that? Hand to God. I mean, look, even if you're an independent that watches the Bald Brad show, does anybody really believe that Joe Biden's leadership is a good thing right now? No, nobody believes. I mean, everybody expects this guy to lose. I mean, Democrats themselves don't want Joe Biden to run again. There's still a small few, and we'd like to know who those small few are, because, I mean, your head must be in the sand. But obviously, she's not going to say the opposite, right? Obviously, she's not going to say what we say here on the channel. The guy sucks at his leadership. He's not doing a great job. He's struggling up here. You feel bad for the guy. You know, it's like elder abuse, what they're doing with this man, of chauffeuring him out. He almost fell down a flight of stairs. I mean, before he fell up a flight of stairs, that's happened multiple times. He hits a golf ball backward. He fights with his teleprompter. He doesn't know his wife's name. He doesn't know his general's names. He forgets that he's president, you guys. He literally just called Kamala Harris president many, many times. He's called other people president many times. He doesn't know what's going on. He's confused. You feel bad for the guy because he's not the same person he used to be. I mean, we can ramble like we always do about Joe Biden, his leadership, and just the disastrous policies he's implementing in this country. But let's move into our third segment of the day. I got to learn this guy's name because Karine Jean-Pierre really doesn't like him. I mean, she has gone out of her way not to call on this guy, but he pushes back here. And I don't know maybe if it's his tone or what it is with her, but he does a phenomenal job here in pushing back, giving her a little bit of sass back like she gives everybody else. Let's go ahead and roll it.
I promise not to use that phrase again.
Social media loved it, though.
Do you mean to tell us that in the discussions between the president and the speaker, and in the discussions between the two negotiating teams, they are only discussing federal discretionary spending, and that they are not at all discussing the terms under which the debt ceiling would be raised?
What I can tell you is what you've heard from the president, what you've heard from both sides, which has been the negotiation has certainly been about the budget. You've heard them talk about the budget. You've heard them talk about how we're moving forward, and that in this particular moment that we're in, they've been productive. The president has held the line and has been very clear that the debt, when it comes to the debt limit, it should be done without negotiations, without condition.
There you go. That says it all. This is the contradiction in the messaging that we've been talking about since the first segment with Peter Alexander of NBC and then Jackie Heinrich of Fox News. If you haven't seen those two segments, please hop over and check them out. I know a lot of you are listening live, but you hear the contradiction there. You're saying that it's productive, and it makes sense why they're only talking about the budget, because from my understanding, and maybe I'm wrong on this, let me know in the comment section below, I do mess up, but I believe that the Republicans have already passed theoretically raising the debt ceiling, or at least in the process of doing so. They've already agreed to it, maybe not literally, but they have agreed in some way, shape, or form of increasing the debt limit, but they also want to figure out the budget first before they actually move along, which again makes sense. We're almost $32 trillion in debt. We got to figure out our budget just in the same way the average American, we got to figure out our own budgets. If we don't, things go south for us. Things are going to go south for the American economy as well. But to say that things are productive is silly when at the same time you're saying, well, the president's not going to budget. Well, then things aren't very productive. And that kind of goes hand in hand with what McCarthy's saying of, we're nowhere near a deal here. We got like 8 or 9 days before this thing goes south, and it's going to be bad, you guys. So also, you saw what Peter Alexander said of NBC News, saying, hey, like there might not be enough time here for everything to actually happen in the next 9 days here. Like our credit rating could take a hit, which isn't good for us. So there's a lot of components here, but she's contradicting herself once again.
Something that the president has said in front of all of you. And he also said,
in the actual
I
rooms.
just
They're
told you.
talking about the debt ceiling, about
I
how
just
long
told
it would be
you.
raised, by how much. That's not a subject of discussion.
Well, first of all, I am telling you what the president has said to all of you.
I know what he said. I follow
Okay.
him very closely
Okay,
every day. I
well
want to know
then-
what's happening in that room.
The president has spoken to what he has said to the leaders in that room, to what he has said to Speaker McCarthy in the room, and he's been very clear. And so he has said, when it comes to the debt limit, it is not negotiable. It should be done without conditions. That's what he has said, that he has been very clear.
But is he
When
living up to that in these talks?
Well, I will also remind you that yesterday the Speaker and the President said, when it comes to default, it is off the table. And I'll leave it there. Okay, let's keep going.
See how quick she moves on there compared to any other reporter? I'm surprised that Jackie Heinrich got as many questions in as she did, but she kept pressing the issue. That guy gives her a little bit sass because he's had enough of her, just along with all of us here on the Ball Brad channel, just her manipulating, saying she's doing things clearly, spinning things in a terrible way, by the way, or just outright lying or gaslighting all of us. But things are productive, you guys. Things are absolutely productive, but the president's not going to do any conditions, but yet they're negotiating. So if you're going to raise the debt ceiling without any negotiations or any other reason out there, then how are you having negotiations in the first place? And then how are they productive? It's so insane. But then at the same time, you're saying, oh, well, McCarthy's acting in good faith. But then you have the Democrat Party, the leadership of the Democrat Party, coming out calling him extremists and all these names. It's just contradictory, all in the same press briefing. It's not even like you're waiting 24 hours to come out on the podium and then contradict yourself. At least you can hide it under the rug a little bit. But we're talking a span of like sometimes 5 minutes or less. You're already contradicting yourself or in the same sentence. It's insane. And I know this isn't anything new here on the Bald Brad Show, but it's just like, are there really people out there that can't see this? And I don't care who the White House press secretary is. It could be on the Republican side of the aisle as well, that we're not able to like actually see that there's manipulation and gaslighting taking place. I don't know. I mean, I see it on both sides. I just see it on way more on the Democrat side of the aisle. I mean, out of any press secretary, she is easily the worst. Easily the worst. I thought Jen Psaki was bad. Jen Psaki I'd almost want back at this point, but at least Jen Psaki took questions and was able to battle a little bit back and forth with Peter Doocy, Phil Wegman and Jackie Heinrich and others. She's not able to do it. Well, moving into our last segment, it's more of a bonus clip here. Folks, she's asked about, do Democrats have a spending problem? Hear her response. It's the clearest response she ever gave. The problem is, it's also the most asinine response she's ever given. I mean, it's a bold-faced lie, is what it is. Let's go ahead and roll it.
Thank you
Listen
so
to
much.
this.
Speaker McCarthy said yesterday in front of the White House that the reason why we are in this problem is because every time Democrats wanted to make a deal, they wanted to make a deal about spending more money. So do you agree with Speaker McCarthy that Democrats have a spending problem?
No.
To it.
What? Hand the God, folks. Do any of you actually believe that Democrats don't have a spending problem? You don't have to throw Democrats in there. Politicians in general. Remember there used to be a thing called a fiscal conservative? That's out the window. There's not real fiscal conservatives anymore. I'm fiscal conservative. I think we should have a budget that works, a budget that actually pays down our debt. I know, folks, if I could, I don't have words to describe to you the bleep storm that's going to happen in the future when we have to pay this off. We're digging ourselves a hole that's so deep. None of us here can fathom $32 trillion. Trillion. Republicans and Democrats, all the knuckleheads that we keep voting in are spending money we don't have. And she's going to say, yeah, we don't have a spending problem. And she sat there with that was the clearest answer she ever gave. No. What? It's baffling. I'm sorry, but it's baffling. We're all in this together, regardless of your age that watches this show. If you're 17, 18, 19, we're all a part of this. We all have to pay this money back. Everybody should be fearful of this. If you're not fearful of some people are fearful of $1,000 in debt. I was $60,000 in debt at one point. It felt like a weight on my shoulders, on my chest. And once I paid it off rather quickly, but I paid it off, I had that relief off my chest. $32 trillion. The average American is going to end up owing minimum like $300,000 per American. I don't know about you, but not everybody has $300,000 laying around, at least liquidable assets. But hey, no, let's see her response to this. She clearly thinks it's funny. It's not that funny to me.
No, to it. Look, I'll say this: the president's budget reduces the deficit, as you know, by nearly $3 trillion over 10 years. Right? This is a president.
Did you hear that? Over 10 years. 10 years. You guys can do the math. You could do the math on it yourself. There needs to be more of a result here. Even if you paid it down, let's just say she's talking about $3 trillion in 10 years, you guys, a decade. You can do the math on how long that's going to take, as long as future presidents don't actually continue to spend more than what's actually coming in. Furthermore, even if you did $1 trillion paid off every year, it's going to take you 30 years. I'm 34. That means I would be in retirement age to even be hopeful of paying off the debt. We're so screwed. We are so screwed.
That believes in dealing with the deficit in a real way. That's on top of the $1.7 trillion that the president has been able to reduce the deficit the last 2 years. So the president takes this very seriously. He's proposed reducing the deficit by eliminating tax breaks for carried interest loopholes, retirement for wealthy real estate investors, and cryptocurrency. He's also proposed raising taxes for billionaires, stock buybacks, and big corporations. And let's not forget the subsidies for big pharma and big oil. For big oil, it costs about $30 billion. For big pharma, it's about $200 billion. That's what it will save if we were able to cut those wasteful spending on subsidies. So the president has laid this out. He's been very clear. Just look at his budget from March 9th. He's laid out how we can cut spending on behalf of the American people and American families. And that is on top of what he's been able to do the last 2 years, $1.7 trillion. Now, more recently, he also talked about doing an
She says 1.7. Joe Biden says 1.7 trillion, but also says 1.7 billion. Folks, these are phony baloney numbers, okay? Phony baloney numbers.
additional $1 trillion on top of the $3 trillion that he proposed in March 9th in his budget. So he's taking this very seriously.
Oh yeah, he's taking it very seriously. But yeah, he's been supposedly negotiating on this stuff and taking it seriously for 5 months. You know what? Also, they've been saying that they've been taking seriously for literally since Joe Biden entered into office on day one was the border crisis. Nothing's been done with that. If anything, Joe Biden actually broke records. So whenever, I've always said this, whenever you hear the Biden administration, the White House stand on that podium and say they're taking something seriously, they are not taking it seriously. And that is echoed by the Republican Party. That is echoed by some Democrats. And that's also echoed by the people that they're negotiation with, called Kevin McCarthy, saying, yeah, we're actually not clear. Which follows up with what she's saying here in the White House press briefing by saying, yeah, we're actually not willing to negotiate on this. The president's not going to budge. We think there should be no conditions. So if there's no conditions, then there's no negotiation, because you can't have a negotiation if there's no conditions. But, you know, hey, Joe Biden's going to resolve all this, you guys. He figured it out. He's going to figure out $3 trillion in 10 years, in the whole decade. Joe Biden's not even going to be around in 10 years. I hate to say it, but it's probably true. He's not going to be around. And if he is, he's going to be a vegetable. Let me know what you think about this, you guys. Do you think they're going to figure it out in 9 days? Because the other conversation that wasn't, I didn't throw this in the White House press briefing, was utilizing the 14th Amendment. Now, the issue with the 14th Amendment is, even if, because the Republicans tried to potentially utilize this as well, the Democrats tried to utilize it as well. I did some research on it. It's very loosey-goosey if it's actually allowed. Based on if you're a constitutional advocate in terms of, you know, actual writings, very similar to Scalia, I would say that the president could not utilize the 14th Amendment. That's just based on when it was implemented and utilizing it. But there is a conversation in modern day to maybe have the president utilize it as a checks and balances. But the issue with more of Joe Biden is there's not enough time, because it's going to get held up in the courts. So we're looking at like a week here. I think it's a little bit too late to be able to utilize it. But who knows what's going to happen? Do you think they're going to be able to figure it out? That's the question of the day. Do you think they're going to be able to figure it out? And if they're going to figure it out, who do you think the blame's going to be on if they don't? Do you think the blame's going to be on Joe Biden or the GOP? Because I'm leaning more towards Joe Biden, because we need to figure this out, you guys. We can't keep putting everything on a credit card here. So thank you so much for joining the Bald Brad Show. Hit the join tab if you haven't already. We do have signed copies on our website. Again, they're limited, you guys. We only have 10 hard copies signed. A little bit pricey, but again, you know, we're signed copy, putting a lot of work to this. You know, if you want a signed copy, again, 10 signed copies of the hardcover, and I think there's only 20, maybe 30 of the paperback. Yeah, so I get the thing. I will ship it out right away. I think we got the P.O. Box things figured out for y'all, and thank you so much. Hit the join tab, become a bigger community than what we already are now, and I'll see you tomorrow here on the Bald Brad Show.